The sky was darkening, heavy clouds casting shadows over the modest two-bedroom house that Maya had made a home for herself and her young son, Liam. As she folded Liam's clothes, worn but neatly ironed, she tried to ignore the dread gnawing at her. She'd known something was wrong for months, but every time she'd asked Connor about his late nights, his disappearing money, the distant look in his eyes, he'd shrugged it off, dismissing her with words that barely hid his irritation. But tonight was different. Tonight, he'd asked her to wait up. When he walked through the door, his face was a hard mask, his eyes avoiding hers as he threw down a crumpled piece of paper. Maya's heart stuttered. It was an eviction notice. "We're leaving, Maya," he said, his voice cold. "I'm done with this life. I found someone new, someone who understands me. You can take Liam, but I don't want you or him in my life anymore." The words were knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. She'd loved him for years, stood by him through every setback and struggle, believing that their love was enough. But now, he was discarding them like they meant nothing. The next morning, Maya packed what little they owned, her heart breaking as she watched Liam cling to his favorite stuffed bear, looking up at her with confused, tear-filled eyes. They left that house, walking out into a world that felt colder and more uncertain than she'd ever known. Every step felt heavier, every movement weighed down by the realization that she and Liam were alone. Maya was terrified, but she forced herself to hold her head high. She found them a cramped room in a small, run-down apartment building on the edge of town, a place where she could at least afford the rent. She got a job at a nearby diner, working long shifts to make ends meet. She did everything she could to shield Liam from the struggles, hiding her own tears at night while he slept. She wanted him to feel safe, wanted him to know that even if his father had abandoned them, he would never be without love. As years passed, Maya's life became a delicate balance between work and raising Liam. She watched him grow with a fierce pride, his wide-eyed innocence gradually giving way to a sharp intelligence and resilience that mirrored her own. But no matter how hard she tried to erase the scars Connor had left, there was a shadow of doubt in Liam's eyes whenever someone mentioned fathers. He never spoke about Connor, and she never pushed him. The memory of that night, of Connor's betrayal, was something she hoped would fade with time. And yet, it was always there. A quiet ache. A reminder of all they'd lost and all they'd rebuilt from the ashes. Then, one day, as Maya returned from work, she saw a letter waiting in her mailbox. The sight of it made her heart pound, a thick, cream-colored envelope with Liam's full name, printed in bold letters across the front. He was nearly 18 now, on the brink of a bright future, one she had sacrificed everything to give him. But as she tore open the envelope, her hands shook with a mixture of pride and fear. Inside was a letter from an elite university, a full scholarship offer for Liam. Her heart swelled as she read the words, knowing that all the sleepless nights and relentless sacrifices had been worth it. Liam had done it. Her son was going to achieve everything she'd dreamed for him, everything Connor had denied them. But as she read further, she felt a chill. The scholarship had been funded by a private sponsor, a mysterious benefactor who wished to remain anonymous. The signature at the bottom was a name she hadn't seen in years, a name that made her blood run cold. It was Connor. Her mind reeled, her heart battling between anger and disbelief. Why now? What did he want after all these years? Had he been watching them from afar, waiting for the moment to swoop back into Liam's life? Or was it guilt, a twisted attempt to make amends for the pain he'd caused? She felt a storm of emotions rising inside her, but one thing was certain. She would do whatever it took to protect Liam from the man who had once shattered their world. As she looked at her son, who was now glancing at her with worry in his eyes, she knew that whatever was coming, they would face it together. Maya couldn't sleep that night, the letter clutched tightly in her hands as if it might vanish and take the mess of feelings with it. She replayed every moment of those long-ago days with Connor, the way he'd abandoned them without a second thought. She remembered the desperation, the humiliation of pleading with him as he turned his back on them. She'd never expected to hear from him again, much less for him to become entangled in Liam's future. The next morning, she decided to tell Liam. He deserved to know, even if the truth risked reopening wounds that had taken years to heal. Over breakfast, Maya sat across from Liam, her fingers tracing the edges of the letter. "Liam," she began, trying to keep her voice steady, "I need to talk to you about this scholarship offer." Liam looked up from his cereal, his face lighting up. "It's amazing, Mom. Can you believe it? Full tuition." Her heart ached, seeing his excitement. She wanted nothing more than to bask in his happiness, but the truth was heavy on her tongue. "Yes, but there's something you need to know about the sponsor behind it." She took a breath. It's from your father." The smile vanished from Liam's face, replaced by a mix of shock and confusion. "Dad?" He nearly choked on the word, as though it tasted bitter in his mouth. "But why? Why would he do this after all this time?" Maya reached for his hand. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe it's guilt, maybe it's some twisted way of feeling like he's helping us after abandoning us. But I wanted you to know the truth, because this offer has strings attached, strings that I don't think he has any right to pull." Liam looked down, his brow furrowed in thought. She could see him struggling, torn between the excitement of this opportunity and the pain of a man who had been nothing more than a ghost in his life. "So, what do we do?" he finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Maya softened, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. "That's up to you, Liam. You've worked so hard for this moment, and no one, certainly not your father, has the right to take it away from you. But I also don't want you to feel indebted to a man who's done nothing but hurt us." For the next few days, Liam was distant, caught in a whirlwind of emotions he couldn't seem to express. Maya wanted to give him space, yet she felt helpless watching him wrestle with a decision he shouldn't have to make. She wished she could shoulder the burden for him, protect him from Connor's influence, but she knew Liam needed to come to his own conclusion. Then, one evening, just as the sun was setting, Liam came to her with a look of determination in his eyes. "I want to meet him," he said, his voice steady. "I want to know why he's doing this. If he thinks he can just throw money at us and make things right, then, well, I want him to say that to my face." Maya's heart lurched, a mixture of pride and fear swelling within her. She wanted to protest, to shield him from whatever pain Connor might inflict, but she also understood Liam's need for answers. He deserved them. "I'll go with you," she said softly, her resolve hardening. She would protect him, no matter what. The following weekend, they arranged to meet Connor at a coffee shop on the other side of town. It was a place Maya hadn't dared to visit since she'd moved into her tiny apartment with Liam all those years ago. As they walked through the door, her heart beat wildly, memories flooding back. She clutched Liam's hand, feeling him give a reassuring squeeze. Connor was already there, seated in the far corner, his gaze fixed on the entrance as if he'd been counting the seconds until they arrived. He looked older, a bit heavier around the middle, with a hint of gray at his temples. Yet his eyes held the same cold, calculating glint she remembered. Liam spoke first, his voice calm but tense. "Why did you offer the scholarship, Dad?" Connor hesitated, caught off guard by Liam's bluntness. He shifted in his chair, forcing a thin smile. "Because I wanted to help you, Liam. I know I've made mistakes, but I have resources now. I wanted to give you a chance I never had." Maya's blood boiled at the hypocrisy of his words, but she held her tongue, waiting for Liam to respond. Liam's jaw tightened, his eyes never leaving his father's face. "A chance? You mean like the one you gave us when you walked out and left us with nothing?" Connor's face faltered, and for a moment, Maya thought she saw a flicker of guilt. But just as quickly, he straightened, giving a dismissive shrug. "Things were complicated back then, Liam. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to be a father. But I'm here now, and I want to make things right." Liam let out a hollow laugh. "Make things right? By buying me off?" His voice was shaking, but there was a strength beneath it that made Maya's heart swell with pride. You don't get to pretend to be my father just because you wrote a check. I worked hard to get where I am, and I didn't do it with your help. Connor's face flushed, his confidence faltering under Liam's gaze. Look, he said, trying to regain his composure, the scholarship is yours. Take it or leave it. But don't think I owe you any more than that. Liam's eyes blazed, but he didn't waver. I don't want your money, he said quietly. I want a father. But you walked away from that a long time ago. With that, Liam stood, turning toward the door. Maya followed, pride and sorrow mingling in her heart as they walked away from the man who had once held their world in his hands. The following days were a blur of emotions for Maya and Liam. After confronting Connor, Maya saw something change in her son. There was a new strength in him, a resolve she hadn't seen before. And while a part of her worried about the pain he must be carrying, she knew this was his journey, a path he had to walk on his own terms. One evening, after a long day at work, Maya found Liam sitting at the kitchen table, a thick envelope in front of him. She immediately recognized the university's crest on the letterhead, and her heart pounded with nervous anticipation. Is that, she began, but her words trailed off as she saw the look on his face. Yeah, Liam said, meeting her gaze. They called me today to follow up on the scholarship. He paused, his eyes shining with a quiet determination. They said I could still accept it. Even if I decline the funding from him. Maya's breath caught in her throat. So you told them? He nodded. I told them I couldn't accept his money. I worked too hard to have him take credit for my future. He took a deep breath. They understood. And they offered me an alternate scholarship. It's smaller, but it'll cover most of my tuition. I'll need to work part-time, but, he shrugged, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. I'm okay with that. Maya's heart swelled with pride. She reached across the table, taking his hands in hers. I am so proud of you, Liam. You've done this all on your own, and no one can ever take that from you. For the first time since they'd met Connor, Liam's face softened, a quiet peace settling over him. You know, Mom, he said thoughtfully, I realized something. All these years, I thought not having a father left this hole in my life. But now, I see that I didn't need him to become who I am. I had you. You were there for me every step of the way. Tears welled up in Maya's eyes. She had poured every ounce of herself into giving Liam the life he deserved, often wondering if it was enough, if he would someday look back and wish for more. But here he was, standing tall, looking at her with a gratitude and love that made every sacrifice worth it. I didn't do it alone, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. We've been a team, Liam. We still are. In the weeks that followed, Liam prepared to leave for college, while Maya worked extra shifts to make up the difference in his tuition. Friends from the diner threw them a small farewell party, filling their modest apartment with laughter and well wishes. For the first time in years, Maya felt a sense of closure, as though the chapter with Connor was finally ending. But just when she thought they'd left him in the past, an unexpected letter arrived in the mail. This time, it was from Connor's lawyer, and the content was nothing short of shocking. Connor had recently passed away. His death had been sudden, an accident, and he'd left a portion of his estate to Liam. Maya's hands trembled as she read the letter, her mind racing. It was almost too much to believe. Connor, who'd done nothing for them, who had only reappeared to cause turmoil in their lives, had left behind a fortune. And it was all to be Liam's, if he chose to accept it. When she told Liam, his reaction was one of stunned silence. He stared at the letter, his face unreadable. What do you want to do? Maya asked gently, her own emotions caught between anger, confusion, and an odd sense of release. Liam was quiet for a long moment, then shook his head. I don't want his money, Mom. It doesn't change anything. Maya reached for his hand, her heart swelling with pride once again. She had raised a son who knew his worth, who understood that money could never replace the love and loyalty they'd shared. But as she held his hand, a thought struck her. What if we could use it for good, she suggested softly, an idea forming in her mind. What if we could turn it into something positive? Something that could help other kids who've been abandoned or need support? Liam looked at her, his expression shifting from resistance to understanding. Like a scholarship, he asked, his voice filled with a mixture of hope and curiosity. Maya nodded. Exactly. A way for you to help other kids who are struggling, kids who need a hand to reach their dreams, just like you did. A slow smile spread across Liam's face, and she saw the spark of purpose light in his eyes. I like that idea, Mom, he said, his voice filled with a new determination. It's a way to turn something painful into something meaningful. Over the next year, Maya and Liam worked together to establish a small foundation, one that would provide scholarships to young people from single-parent families. They named it the Heart and Hope Foundation, a symbol of their journey and the life they'd built from the ashes of abandonment. As the foundation grew, Maya watched with pride as Liam continued to excel in college, each step taking him closer to a future he'd earned on his own terms. The boy who'd once felt the weight of his father's absence was now a young man with purpose, driven not by bitterness but by compassion and strength. One day, years later, as they stood at the opening ceremony for their foundation's newest scholarship recipient, Maya felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known was possible. She'd come full circle, turning a story of betrayal and hardship into one of resilience and hope. And in that moment, surrounded by grateful families and hopeful students, Maya knew they had finally laid the past to rest. The memory of Connor no longer held any power over them. She and Liam had found their peace together, stronger than ever, with hearts that had healed, filled with hope for the future. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel and enjoy these other amazing stories.